This is the way.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the Season 3 finale of The Mandalorian. So we're going to break down this episode, talk about what's next for Din Djarin and Din Grogu, and answer some questions that you might have about this season. So let's dive in. Now, my favorite thing about this... Look real close.
Are you stress eating veggie chips again in the middle of an Easter egg video? Person, we talked about this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not even hungry. It's just a compulsive thing. Like, it's really hard to stop.
Yeah, well, you can't eat in the middle of a video. It's unseemly.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'll work on it. Now, back to what I was saying. So the episode begins with Bo Katan leading the Mandalorians on an escape through the tunnels with axe wolves flying above the clouds to hunt the fleet. Now, the last episode was called Spies, leading to a lot of rampant online speculation about who these spies actually were. We were part of that speculation. So all episode long, I was waiting for somebody to turn on the group, the armor, axe wolves, the refugees, and it turns out the real spies were the friends we made along the way.
Seriously though, who were the spies?
I guess the Imperials who were already living on Mandalore. It's a little wonky.
They should have picked a different episode title.
Should have picked a different title. Now, there is a lot of fighting in corridors in this episode, and this is for a couple reasons. One, it's awesome and a lot of fun. Hallways compress and funnel the action into one narrow space and place the heroes in a do-or-die situation. It's why these fights have become all the rage in TV shows. But also, hallways are cheap to film. In this show and in Obi-Wan, they filmed a lot in the volume, the 360 AR environment, which means that it's easier to keep the environment in a tighter space. Now, of course, later in the episode, the action explodes outwards, which I'll talk about in just a bit. Bo Katan uses the narrow hallway to set traps for these Beskar wearing troopers. And you know what? These troopers may be wearing Beskar, but they still fight like good old incompetent cannon fodder stormtroopers. Over the years, Star Wars has introduced troopers that are better fighters. The Death Troopers that escorted Moff Gideon in Season 1, and the Sith Purge Troopers that we see in Fallen Order and in the show Obi-Wan. Those troopers were trained to fight Jedi Knights, so they are incredibly badass.
Maybe these troopers are really good fighters, but the Mandalorians are just a little bit better.
And that is a really good point. I mean, later, Din barely takes them down when he made mincemeat out of regular troopers in Episode 3. Hold on just one second.
Hey, what is that? Are you vaping?
Oh, not at all. I'm just trying to kick my oral fixation habit. You know, the stress eating we talked about earlier. This just gives me something to do when I'm feeling anxious, which is, like, frankly, all the time.
Well, then what is that?
This is a naturally diffusive device called Fume. They're the sponsor of this video. It uses plants and behavioral science to help you trade out your negative habit for a positive one.
Well, is it fun?
Yes, it's great. It's very relaxing. See, instead of pods filled with potentially harmful chemicals like a vape does, Fume uses these cores that are infused with plants like peppermint and cinnamon for delicious natural flavors.
But I don't smell any smoke, and I'm a dog. I can smell smoke from real far away.
Yeah, dude, it's not a vape. It's not even electrical. Fume uses flavored air instead of vapor. Instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural blends like citrus. So like whenever I get anxious, I used to constantly eat peppermint candies, but now I just pick the crisp mint flavor pack. It's my favorite one. It smells so good. See, Fume is great for changing your negative habits into positive habits. It also has an adjustable airflow, and it's designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is also helpful for calming your anxiety. Fume wants to make switching easy and even fun. They have thousands of 5-star reviews from people who have changed their lives and switched when other solutions just didn't work. So head to tryfume.com/ScreenCrush and use the code ScreenCrush to get 10% off your Journey Pack today. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors and everything you need to finally be free of your bad habit. That is tryfum.com and use the code ScreenCrush to get an additional 10% off your order today. So back to the troopers. It is kind of lame that they only place 2 guards on Din, or at least it's very arrogant of them to think that 2 guards would be enough. When he tries to break free, the Dark Troopers unload Mandalorian weapons on him, like grappling cables and flamethrowers. Now, these weapons were originally created to fight Jedi. A Jedi could predict and dodge a blaster bolt, but a flamethrower creates a wider attack that Jedi have a harder time escaping from, while the grappling cable ties up their hands and neutralizes their lightsabers. But these weapons also work well against their fellow Mandalorians. The armor does not cover their necks, so the cables can choke them.
Why doesn't the armor cover their necks?
Because if the armor covered their necks, then they couldn't turn their heads, and they would look like Michael Keaton Batman all the time.
Ah, I see.
And the flamethrowers will superheat the Beskar armor until the Mandalorians can't stay inside of it, kind of like what Killian did to Rhodey in Iron Man 3. We also saw in Star Wars Rebels that Beskar is vulnerable to certain types of heat and energy wavelengths that can completely fry the metal and anyone inside of it. Now, my favorite part of this fight is when Din neutralizes this guy, but uses his own flamethrower to attack his best friend.
They're best friends?
I like to imagine they're best friends, yes. But then Grogu is the one who saves Din.
No.
Now this season has brought these two full circle. In Season 1, Din saved Grogu from the Imperials. In Season 2, Din saved Grogu from the Imperials. In the Book of Boba Fett, Din saved Grogu from a life of celibacy. And in this season, Grogu has saved Din's life twice. Kind of reminds me of the life debt that Chewbacca owed Han.
Or the Jar Jar owed to Qui-Gon Jinn.
Sure. But remember, Han also liked to tease Luke about how many times he saved his bacon.
That's 2 you owe me, Junior.
Yeah, and Luke returned the favor.
I owe you one.
Yeah, right. Now the funniest part of this is when Grogu uses IG-12's hypo spray to try to heal Din's boo-boo. Remember, IG-11 used this on Din in the Season 1 finale. Now the hypo spray wouldn't work through Din's helmet, but Grogu doesn't know that because he's a baby and all he knows is that his dad has a boo-boo and that this thing in his arm is medicine.
Man, that's cute.
Din tells him,
"If we don't take out Moff Gideon, this will never end."
and he's right, the two of them have basically been on the run since Episode 3, whether they realize it or not. Now it's saying a lot that Din is willing to let Grogu risk his life here because it shows how much he trusts him to protect himself. They've come a long way in 3 seasons. Now the episode is called The Return. Now we've talked about this in a few videos, but this season has leaned very heavily on religious themes, with episodes titled The Apostate and The Convert, and this Mandoa tablet in Episode 1 is a passage from the Book of Exodus about the Jews returning to Israel, just as the Mandalorians are trying to return to their homeland in this episode. History is filled with stories about the Jewish people being forced from Israel and then seeking to return home. Also, there are different sects of Mandalorians. Just like within every religion, there are many different groups of people who don't quite agree with one another. They all share the same core beliefs, but interpret the meaning very differently. In the case of the Mandalorians, we have the new Mandalorians, who are pacifists. They're essentially like atheist Jews who embrace the traditions, but not the religion.
Weapons are part of my religion.
There's Bo Katan's group that practices the old ways, but in more of a performative function.
I took the creed and was showered with gifts, but the rituals were all just theater for our subjects.
And then there are the Children of the Watch, who are like the ultra-Orthodox Jews, who are very traditional, believe in always covering your head, and follow a Jewish law called halacha, which translates to the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
We will probably dive deeper into that in a future video, but I just want to give you a feel for how important this return is for these people. Mandalorians coming home to retake their world for good is a huge turning point in the galaxy. Mandalore was traditionally a superpower in the Outer Rim, with a sphere of influence that extended to thousands of worlds. In the new Daisy Ridley Star Wars movie, which takes place 15 years after Rise of Skywalker, the Mandalorians could potentially be a threat to the new Jedi Order. But, like I said, that's probably for a future video. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Then we see the TIE Interceptors leaving their roost to fly off into battle. So TIE Interceptors first appeared in Return of the Jedi, and production designer Joe Johnston said in interviews years ago that they were designed to look like bats, so it's very cool that they roost like bats. Din asked for help from R5, and you know what? At first I thought that R5 was like Easter egg overload, but now he's got this little arc that extends into the novels. R5 lived on Tatooine in Attack of the Clones, then he was drafted into the Rebellion decades later, and then he was stranded back on Tatooine before A New Hope. Now he met R2 on the Jawa Sandcrawler and learned about his mission for the Rebellion. He basically decided to blow his motivator on purpose in A New Hope because R2 was so important to the Rebellion. Now all of that is adapted from a pretty funny comic book called Skippy the Jedi Droid, written by Peter David. Now Peter David is one of the great comics writers and Star Trek writers of our time, and he is currently struggling to pay his medical bills. So if you have the time and the inclination, please check out the GoFundMe that his family has set up. Every little bit helps. So back to R5. He was fine with living on Tatooine, and he was afraid to get back into the galactic fray with Din Djarin. So I like that they've given him these fears to overcome. Him having to open and close doors and hack into systems is a lot like R2-D2, first in A New Hope with the trash compactor, and then in Revenge of the Sith with the elevators. Just like in Revenge of the Sith, the droid gets distracted by enemy droids, but instead of burning them alive with oil and his rocket jets, R5 just kind of scares away this little mouse droid. Grim Monkey on Twitter points out that this mouse droid and the one from A New Hope hum the same tune. Later on, several mouse droids, mice droids, I guess, appear with little tiny warning sirens on their tops. So in A New Hope, these little guys were supposed to be messenger droids, but now I guess they're also tiny security forces.
Makes sense since there's like no security cameras ever in Star Wars.
Yeah, actually there's only security cameras when the heroes need to blast them, like in the Death Star detention level. There were a lot of security cameras there. It took them a long time to blast all of them. Anyways, R5 scomps the base, which means to hack into it. Thank you to Gorsham Patrick on Twitter for that observation. Then he sends a holographic layout of the base to Din, very similar to the holo maps that you read in the game Fallen Order. And when R5 flies away, notice that one of the droids just rolls backward to its little death.
That's so sad.
Yeah, we shouldn't joke, actually. There are a lot of needless deaths on Imperial bases due to lack of handrails. So Axe Woves gets back to the ship to evacuate.
Wait, are they surrendering?
No. So it's like this. The Mandalorians have this one smallish light cruiser and a few Gauntlet fighters. But the Gauntlet fighters are also troop transports, so they need them to deliver people to the planet. Now, these fighters are not as advanced as the TIE Interceptors, so they wouldn't stand up in a dogfight. The Imperials also have TIE Bombers, which we first saw in The Empire Strikes Back here. Now, TIE Bombers are bad news for a capital ship, but they're not very effective in fighter versus fighter combat. So normally, a capital ship would have fighters to protect the ship from these bombers. But in this case, the fleet is just too small, and they don't have enough fighters to fend off the TIE Interceptors. A lot of space combat in Star Wars is inspired by the World War II films that George Lucas watched when he was a kid. In fact, Paul Hirsch's early rough cuts of Star Wars used actual World War II dogfight footage in place of the unfinished visual effects shots. So these ships follow the same real-world principles, where smaller fighters had to accompany the B-12 bombers on their bombing runs. But instead, the Mandalorians evacuate so they can use gauntlets to transport troops to the surface. Imperial air power is useless on the planet because all the fighting is underground.
All right, gotcha. That's very informative. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Din fights the Death Troopers in a hallway with these red blast shields like we saw in The Phantom Menace. Only there, it was to protect from radiation overspill, and here it's a security measure. Eric Voss at New Rockstars pointed out that this is a lot like the opening sequence of Get Smart. Really cool observation. The troopers are fighting with electro staffs. Now, we first saw Grievous's guards use these in Revenge of the Sith, and they're designed specifically to combat Jedi Knights. They were also used by the Purge troopers we saw in Fallen Order, because at the time of that game, about 5 years after Order 66, there were still a lot of Jedi running around the galaxy. And actually, in the original draft of Star Wars, even the Stormtroopers would have carried lightsabers to fight Jedi with. The cylinder on the back of the Stormtrooper armor was meant to hold a lightsaber. And of course, this badass in A Force Awakens had an electro staff all of his own.
Raider!
So many cool details about this fight. I like how the troopers wear Beskar shields on their back for protection, kind of like Captain America, and those shields also include a tiny triangular window, like the window on the bridge of an Imperial starship. I imagine this is so they can use them as like riot shields in case a Mandalorian uses a flamethrower against them. And Din does the camera knife whip pan trick. Now this is a fun camera technique if you're shooting an action movie. A character takes a knife and pretends to throw it, and then the camera whip pans to someone else holding the knife and reacts to the throw. It's really cool. So Din has one major advantage in this fight. He grew up learning to fight Mandalorians who wear Beskar armor, like we saw the apprentices doing one another a few episodes ago, whereas these troopers are trained to fight like stormtroopers who just happen to be wearing Beskar armor.
That's actually a weakness because they're going to fight like they're invincible when they are not.
Then we see, finally, Gideon's master plan. He wasn't cloning Snoke or the Emperor, he's just a massive egotist who was cloning himself, a little like Tony Stark.
More me.
Now this Gideon reveal was set up in the last episode when we found out that Gideon was not in charge of the Necromancer project that's going to raise Palpatine from the dead. Instead, he was doing his own thing.
I will create an army that will bring order to the galaxy.
Now I just have to mention these cloning tanks and the clones being broken out are a lot like the show The Venture Brothers, except this show, The Mandalorian, didn't have the guts to show us an army of gooey, naked Gideon clones fighting off Mandalorians. Now I actually think one of the most important scenes in this episode involves no action at all. It's when the refugees show off their little underground farm.
But why is that important?
Well, it shows that Mandalore is worth fighting for. It's not just glass and sand, it is being reborn.
Life, life finds a way.
Exactly. So, here's the thing. Mandalore was not always a desert. It used to be a lush jungle world and mythosaurs roamed the surface. But then the Mandalorians waged constant civil war which turned the planet into a desert, and that is why they live in dome cities in the Clone Wars. And it's why Duchess Satine's pacifist movement became so popular. But what's most important here is that these plants are native to Mandalore. It shows that the planet itself still has life within it. Symbolically, this is like the mythosaur living beneath the surface, just like the strength of the Mandalorian people is waiting to be reborn. Also, Skinny Pete's pauldron is made up of the head from a battle droid. A couple people pointed that out to me last week on Twitter, but I couldn't get a good look at it. Here, yes, I can see it's definitely a battle droid head. And it turns out that the armorer is not a traitor either. There were a lot of fan theories about that. We put up a video about it, but I never actually thought she was going to be a full-on traitor. But I do think that she used to serve under Darth Maul, hence the horns on her helmet and the red chest plate.
So does Gideon have horns because he also worked for Darth Maul?
No, he has horns because they look cool.
Looks tough.
And then, oh man, look, if you watch the Clone Wars and Rebels, then the sight of a live-action Bo Katan pulling out the Dark Saber and leading hundreds of Mandalorians with jetpacks into battle, that is a special moment for us. And if you didn't watch those shows, it's still f***ing cool. Way cooler than this.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
They fly now, and it is awesome.
Yes, and notice how the armorer still uses her hammer in combat instead of like a blaster. A lot trickier to fight with a melee weapon in midair, but it's so cool, so, we'll let it go. Dots Insights pointed out that Bo Katan uses these sweet knee rockets that we saw Boba Fett use. And then Din finally confronts Gideon. Notice he grabbed a Death Trooper's backpack along the way, and Gideon finally explains his master plan.
My clones, the best parts of me, but improved by adding the one thing I never had. The Force.
Now, what Gideon is actually describing here is that he plans to become God of this world, to replace the people of Mandalore with himself. See, God is endless. God is one. God is all-encompassing in just himself or herself. So, by becoming the entire military, Gideon would then reign supreme. Gideon would be all there is. So this isn't just a battle for the physical world of Mandalore. It's a battle for the soul of Mandalore. And I should also point out that if Gideon did figure out how to make Force-sensitive clones, well, this is what Palpatine was still trying to do in Rise of Skywalker. Create a Force-sensitive clone body that could contain his essence. If Gideon hadn't been so selfish, so Sith-like, then this research would have been used by Project Necromancer, and then
Somehow Palpatine returned.
would have happened a lot sooner. Now notice that Gideon's new armor whirs when he moves. This is because it's not just Beskar armor, it's a kind of mech suit, probably incorporating some of the tech from the Dark Troopers that we saw in Season 2. This gives him augmented strength, which is why later in the fight he's able to catch Din's punch like this. Then the Praetorian Guards show up. Now, we first saw these guys in The Last Jedi when they were the heavies in the best fight of the sequel trilogy. Last week, we briefly mentioned that they are named after the Praetorian Guard from the Roman army, who were assigned to serve high-ranking officials and senators. But we should also mention that after the Roman Republic fell and became the Roman Empire, these guards were reassigned to protect the Emperor and his people. This is important because the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire in Star Wars is based on ancient Rome. And here we see these guards in a time that is transitioning from a Republic back into a new kind of empire. Grogu leads them away from Din while a variation of his theme plays. I was on the edge of my seat during this fight because there were rumors that Pedro Pascal was leaving the show, and I really thought that he might sacrifice himself to save Grogu. Grogu uses his force jumping abilities to climb up on the track lighting. Now, this is the same chamber where the Imperials had their meeting last episode, and it actually seems based off the war room in Doctor Strangelove.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
But even in the middle of all this, Grogu laughs. Gideon has Din pinned down, and Bo Katan shows up and says,
Go save your kid.
How did she know that Grogu was in trouble?
because it said so in the screenplay.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it makes sense.
So Din breaks into the fight, killing one of the elite guards immediately.
Wow, Paz Vizsla really should have tried just like shooting one of them.
I know, right? And then we finally get the Bo Katan Moff Gideon showdown. Last season ended with Gideon using the Dark Saber versus a spear, and this season ends with Gideon using a staff to fight the Dark Saber. Great intercutting between these two fights as Grogu keeps using the Force to keep the odds even for Din, and Axe Woves pulls a Holdo-ish kamikaze attack on the base.
I'm coming in hard. Clear everyone out.
Now, we've talked about religious metaphors all the way through this season, and here's a pretty big one. All through the season, we've seen different plagues of Egypt. We've had large beasts rising from the land, we've had computer bugs representing the locust, the god sent to Egypt, and in this episode, Din kills the firstborn son of Moff Gideon, also known as his clones. Gideon even says,
You smothered them before they could draw their first breath.
and we're going to talk about all of that meaning in a video next week. Can't wait to make it for you. It's going to be awesome. And then, and this is a big shock, Gideon breaks the Dark Saber. Now, I hope this thing stays broken because there's a lot of symbolism tied up into this. The Dark Saber was created by a Mandalorian Jedi named Tar Vizsla who conquered Mandalore. It's been the focal point of Mandalorian infighting for centuries. We did a video about how the blade is cursed because it brings with it an endless pursuit of power that has destroyed this world. The saber being useless is a sign that Mandalore is ready to stop infighting and they can move forward into greatness. I really hope this isn't like Anakin's saber where it was broken in Last Jedi, symbolizing a break with the past traditions. Now this, along with Rey being from no one, meant that she was now free to forge her own path and create her own saber. But then in the next movie, it's suddenly put together again as she learns that she is in fact deeply tied into this past.
You are a Palpatine.
Worst sentence ever said in a Star Wars movie.
Agreed. So Gideon alludes to the assigned importance to the Dark Saber, saying,
Mandalorians are weak once they lose their trinkets.
Bo Katan echoes this new united Mandalore when she says,
Mandalorians are stronger together.
no one sect could defeat Gideon, but a child of the Watch and a former member of Death Watch.
They get the job done.
Okay, and you know everybody makes it out just fine. Axwove's evacuated and Grogu does the season 1 thing where he holds back the flames of the explosion. It's a beautiful little moment that I thought felt a lot like this.
We are Groot.
And if you're a fan of Star Wars Rebels, it's reminiscent of a scene where Kanan Jarrus also holds back flames to protect his found family. Thanks Norhall on Twitter for that reminder. And Grogu still gets tuckered out after using the Force too much. And then we go back to Sundari, the capital city of the planet. Bo Katan alluded to this place earlier when she said,
I've only ever seen gardens in the domed cities.
And we're right back to finish the baptism of Ragnar, which was interrupted by a monster attack in the first episode this season. Ragnar is the son of Paz Vizsla, and he's also played by Wesley Kimmel, nephew of Jimmy. It's important to note that the first baptism was interrupted because that planet was inhospitable to the Mandalorians, whereas now this is on their world, and they have nothing to fear from these living waters or the monster who lives inside of them. It's also cool that the first person baptized on this new Mandalore is a Vizsla, because his clan is so important to Mandalorian history, from Tar Vizsla to Pre Vizsla, who was the leader of Death Watch. And then Din formally makes Grogu a foundling by legally becoming his father.
Then I will adopt him as my own.
You are now Din Grogu, Mandalorian Apprentice.
Oh crap, wait, his surname was Din this whole time?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the Mandalorians are like Japanese people where your last name is pronounced first, but like, hold on, Bo Katan Kryze and her sister Satine Kryze didn't do that. So you know what? Maybe it's a Children of the Watch thing. It doesn't matter. We're overthinking it.
Overthinking it is what we do in this channel.
True. So I thought it was cool how at the ceremony, all those Mandalorians chose to wear their helmets to honor the traditions of the Children of the Watch. Or maybe they always do this during the ceremony to honor the old ways.
Safe in the braid of the old.
I can't believe this.
Remember, Bo Katan went through a similar ceremony when she was a child.
I was part of the royal family. I took the creed and was showered with gifts.
And of course, we set up the next quest as she tells him,
You must leave Mandalore and take your apprentice on his journeys, just as your teacher did for you.
Who was Din's teacher?
well, if I had to guess, I would say he was raised by the armorer.
So she's Grogu's gram-gram?
Yes, and you know what, while I'm thinking of it, I'm a little surprised that Grogu never took a shot to the chest in this episode, so then Din would be like, oh my god, he's dead! But then he would see the hidden armor that she made for him while they were separated.
Oh yeah, like Frodo at his mithril fake-out death.
Mithril.
Exactly, so then something very interesting happens. Grogu talks to the mythosaur through the Force beneath the water. So we never got the mythosaur rising up in this episode, but Bo Katan spotting the beast earlier in the season did herald in a new age for the planet, like the song the armorer talked about.
The songs of eons past foretold of the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore.
But Grogu is the one who actually uses the Force to communicate with the mythosaur. Maybe when the animal rises from the water, it will serve Grogu, and like many of you have theorized, maybe Grogu will be the true leader of this planet for hundreds of years to come. And remember, Grogu connected with a large beast before, with the Rancor in the Book of Boba Fett. And then they light the Great Forge in a scene that seems to mix the joy of the Olympic torch with the catharsis of the ending of Return of the King, when the white tree bloomed again.
Now come the days of the king.
I thought this episode might reveal other Mandalorians from the shows, like Finn Rau or Ursa Wren, but then we see this character from Clone Wars. This is your mom. So then the Din clan flies to the New Republic base that we saw a few episodes ago. No Zeb in sight, but we do see Dave Filoni's character, Trapper Wolf. The cameo is getting distracting, by the way. A Mon Calamari, a Rodian, and a Snivian bartender, who, by the way, is played by Misty Roses, who also played Frog Lady and was the body for Kuil. And like we pointed out in the past, the Imperial trophy helmets overhead. We see Stormtroopers, Shore Troopers, Scout Troopers, a TIE pilot helmet, a probe droid head, and this RA-7 droid head. Grogu hops right to the counter to eat some pork rinds, and he misses his friend.
Your kid sure likes the trophies.
It's not him, kid.
Din and Carson Teva set up a pretty solid premise for Season 4, but Din and Grogu going on a series of self-contained adventures to take down Imperials as independent contractors for the New Republic. He's come a long way from calling them a joke in Season 1.
Let's go back to the core and report them to the New Republic.
That's a joke.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Like just a return to basics, no complications or politics and all that stuff.
Yeah, but they're working for the New Republic, so you know it's going to be tied into the rise of Thrawn and this greater story in the Dave Filoni movie.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
Back on Navarro, Din meets with Grief Karga to get a deed to a cabin. Din has brought him a new marshal to replace Cara Dune, a rebuilt IG-11 voiced by Taika Waititi. And here are the Anzellans looking very proud after having rebuilt him, but they're keeping their distance from Grogu.
No, it's crazy.
Man, that's cute. I mean, like I'm cute, but that is incredibly cute.
You are incredibly cute, Doug, but you know what?
Oh, here we go again.
Now, if any of you are fans of this channel and you like what we do here, then maybe you would like this Doug the Foundling shirt, or this original trilogy t-shirt, or this Somehow Palpatine Return t-shirt at our merch store at shopzeroedition.com. We have lots of other t-shirts, including our brand new April shirt, the Wizard Tee, with Doug flying through space with his head out the window of an N1.
That is objectively cool. Thank you.
I am glad you think so. So shopping our merch store really does help out the channel, and we appreciate all the time you spend here with us. Thanks so much. Now, let's get back to those Easter eggs. The crowd has a few non-human species, a Gran, a Mon Calamari, and whatever this thing is. What the hell is this thing?
It's your mom!
And then we end with Din and Grogu at their new cabin. This ending has actually been set up like for several seasons now, like on the Seven Samurai planet when Din was tempted to settle down.
You and your boy could have a good life. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would.
But the thing is, in westerns, even space westerns, the idea is usually that a hero can never settle down. They have chosen a life of violence, and then the violent life will always find them. This little cabin does remind me of the farm where Clint Eastwood lived in Unforgiven. So in that movie, Eastwood is a legendary gunfighter who has long since retired to a life of peace with his family. No spoilers, but he does get pulled back into the violent life. And I'm sure that's going to happen to Din and Grogu at some point. Maybe in the next season, maybe in the Dave Filoni sequel movie. But for now, they can have their happy ending. We even end on a circle over the two of them to show that they are at the heart of this new farm. So this technique is called an iris shot, and it's often used in classic films, especially in animation like Looney Tunes. It was normally done by closing the camera's iris to only show part of the frame, kind of like the James Bond gun barrel opening sequence. So that's the season, and I have to offer up a really big thank you to everybody for watching. The Mandalorian is a really special show for us because it was the first TV show where we got really huge views for the channel. It's probably how a lot of you found our channel to begin with, and your support has helped us grow for years now. And I especially want to thank our crew: editors Harriet Lengel-Enright, Randolf Nombrado, Brianna McLarty, Colton Ogburn, Srinidhi Rao, Pavel Tehrahovsky, Dodson Seitz, and our interns Lee Mazio, Ethan Ing, Chantel Stafford, and Rohale Mystery, as well as Matt Singer, Heather Antos, and everybody else who contributes to our talkbacks.
And I just want to thank everybody.
You don't see these people on screen often, but they make ScreenCrush what it is.
Wow. I see how it is.
Oh no, yeah, you too, man, you're great. We have plenty more follow-up videos to The Mandalorian, so keep it subscribed here at ScreenCrush. And just a reminder, everyone, to change your bad habits today, head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use the code ScreenCrush to save an additional 10% off your order today. But most importantly, we want to hear from all of you down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. What did you think about the episode? And if you're new here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.